Your skeleton is not the static, unchanging structure many people imagine it to be. It is living tissue, constantly being broken down and rebuilt in a process called bone remodeling, which continues throughout your entire life. In your younger years, bone formation outpaces bone breakdown, which is why bone density typically peaks somewhere around your late 20s or early 30s. After that point, the balance gradually shifts, and beginning particularly around menopause for women and more gradually for men, bone breakdown can start to outpace bone formation, leading to a slow, often silent loss of bone density over the years. This is exactly why osteoporosis is sometimes called a silent disease, since bone loss typically produces no symptoms at all until a fracture actually occurs, often from something as minor as a stumble or a light fall that would not have caused any harm decades earlier. The good news is that nutrition plays a genuinely powerful role in supporting bone strength at every stage of life, including well into your 60s, 70s, and beyond. While food alone cannot reverse significant bone loss once it has occurred, particularly in cases of diagnosed osteoporosis, a nutrient-rich diet can meaningfully support the bone remodeling process, slow further loss, and work alongside other healthy habits to protect your skeletal strength for years to come. Let us walk through 7 foods that nutrition researchers and doctors consistently point to as valuable additions to a bone-supporting diet. It is worth pausing on why this particular health issue tends to fly so far under the radar for so many people. Unlike a heart problem that might announce itself through chest discomfort or a digestive issue that produces obvious daily symptoms, bones simply do not send pain signals as they gradually lose density. There is no ache that develops as bone mass declines, no early warning twinge that tells you something has changed. The very first sign many people experience is a fracture itself, often from a fall that would have been completely harmless with stronger bones. This is exactly why building bone-supportive habits before any noticeable problem arises matters so much, and why nutrition, something entirely within your control at every single meal, deserves a much bigger role in how we think about aging well. Food number 1 is dairy, particularly yogurt, milk, and cheese. Dairy products are among the most concentrated and easily absorbed sources of calcium available, and calcium is the primary mineral your body uses to build and maintain bone structure. A single cup of plain yogurt or a glass of milk provides a substantial portion of the calcium most adults need in a day, and many dairy products sold in the United States are also fortified with vitamin D, a nutrient that works hand in hand with calcium by helping your body actually absorb it from your digestive tract. Without adequate vitamin D, even a calcium-rich diet becomes considerably less effective, since much is a number that surprises most people the first time they hear it. According to the most recent national health data, roughly 10 million Americans over the age of 50 are currently living with osteoporosis, and an additional 43 million have low bone mass, meaning they are already on the path toward it. For women over 65, the numbers are even more striking, with nearly 1 in 5 affected. And here is the part that should genuinely grab your attention. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men over 50 will experience a bone fracture caused by weakened bones at some point in their life. Today, we are covering 7 everyday foods that may help keep your bones strong as you age. Stay with me until the end, because the 7th food on this list is one almost nobody associates with bone health, and the research behind it genuinely surprised scientists when it was first discovered. Before we get into it, if you find value in clear, practical health information like this, take a moment to subscribe to Longevity Insight. This channel exists to help you stay strong, active, and independent as the years go on. And we release new videos regularly covering exactly the kind of everyday health topics that make a real difference, but rarely get the attention they deserve. It takes 2 seconds, and it means you will not miss what is coming next. Now, let us talk about your bones. How did that calcium simply passes through the body unused? For anyone who is lactose intolerant or chooses not to consume dairy, lactose-free dairy products and fortified plant-based alternatives can provide similar benefits, which brings us to food number 4 a little later in this list. Food number 2 is leafy green vegetables, including kale, collard greens, bok choy, and to a lesser extent, spinach. These vegetables provide a meaningful amount of calcium in their own right, but their real standout contribution to bone health comes from vitamin K, a nutrient that plays a critical role most people have never heard of. Vitamin K helps activate specific proteins in your body that are directly involved in binding calcium to your bone matrix, essentially helping ensure that the calcium you consume actually ends up strengthening your bones rather than simply circulating unused. Leafy greens also provide magnesium, another mineral essential for converting vitamin D into its active form and for supporting the overall structural framework of bone tissue. It is worth noting that spinach specifically contains compounds called oxalates that can slightly reduce calcium absorption from that particular vegetable, which is why nutrition researchers often highlight kale and collard greens as slightly more efficient calcium sources among the leafy greens, though spinach still offers plenty of other valuable nutrients worth including in a balanced diet. Food number 3 is fatty fish, including salmon, sardines, and mackerel. These fish are among the best natural dietary sources of vitamin D, a nutrient that a significant portion of American adults, particularly older adults, do not get enough of, especially during winter months or for those who spend limited time outdoors. This matters enormously for bone health because vitamin D governs how much of the calcium you eat actually gets absorbed into your bloodstream in the first place, meaning a diet rich in calcium but low in vitamin D leaves much of that calcium's potential benefit on the table, quite literally passing through the digestive system without being put to use. Sardines specifically offer an additional bone health bonus since they are typically eaten with their soft, edible bones intact, providing a meaningful dose of calcium alongside their vitamin D content. Fatty fish also provide omega-3 fatty acids, which research suggests may help reduce inflammation in the body, a factor that some studies have linked to bone density preservation, particularly in older adults managing chronic low-grade inflammation from other health conditions. Aiming for fatty fish a couple of times a week is a reasonable, achievable target for most people looking to work more of this nutrient into their regular routine. Food number 4 is fortified foods, including fortified plant-based milks like soy, almond, and oat milk, as well as fortified orange juice and certain breakfast cereals. For people who do not consume dairy, whether due to lactose intolerance, dietary preference, or simply personal taste, fortified foods offer a practical way to still reach adequate calcium and vitamin D intake. It is worth taking a moment to actually read nutrition labels here, since fortification levels can vary considerably between brands and products, and choosing options specifically fortified with both calcium and vitamin D provides the most direct bone health benefit. This category has become increasingly important as more Americans shift toward plant-based diets, and food manufacturers have responded by fortifying a wider range of products than were available even a decade ago. Food number 5 is nuts and seeds, particularly almonds, sesame seeds, and chia seeds. These foods provide a meaningful combination of calcium, magnesium, and healthy fats, all of which contribute to bone health in different ways. Almonds in particular offer a solid dose of both calcium and magnesium in a single convenient snack, making them an easy addition to a daily routine, whether sprinkled over yogurt, added to a salad, or simply eaten on their own as a snack between meals. Sesame seeds, often overlooked, are surprisingly calcium-dense for their size, and a spoonful of tahini, which is made from ground sesame seeds, can be a flavorful way to work this nutrient into meals like dips, dressings, and sauces. Food number 6 is eggs, which provide a modest but meaningful amount of vitamin D, concentrated primarily in the yolk. While eggs are not as concentrated a source of vitamin D as fatty fish, they are convenient, affordable, and versatile enough to be part of a daily diet for many people, making them a practical, everyday contributor to overall vitamin D intake rather than a standalone solution on their own. Eggs also provide high-quality protein, and adequate protein intake is itself an important, sometimes underappreciated factor in bone health. Since bone tissue is not made of minerals alone, it also relies on a protein framework called collagen that gives bone its flexibility and resistance to fracture. And now food number 7, the one I promised you at the beginning, prunes, also known as dried plums. This one genuinely surprised researchers when studies first began examining it more closely. Multiple clinical studies, including research conducted at universities specifically focused on bone health, have found that women who ate a small daily serving of prunes, typically somewhere between 5 and 12 prunes a day, showed measurably better preservation of bone density over the course of the study compared to those who did not, even when other dietary factors were accounted for. What makes this finding particularly notable is that prunes outperformed other dried fruits tested in similar studies, including dried apples, suggesting the effect is not simply a general benefit of eating any dried fruit, but something more specific to prunes themselves. Researchers believe this effect may be linked to specific plant compounds in prunes that appear to help reduce the rate of bone breakdown, working through pathways that are still being actively studied, potentially involving how these compounds influence the cells responsible for breaking down old bone tissue during the natural remodeling process. Prunes also provide a reasonable amount of vitamin K and potassium, both of which independently support bone health. But it is this specific bone density research that has made prunes something of an unexpected star in the nutrition science world, showing up in bone health recommendations that would have seemed unlikely just a couple of decades ago. If someone had told you a dried fruit found in nearly every grocery store could genuinely support your skeletal health, you probably would not have believed them, and yet here we are. Now that we have covered all 7 foods, let us talk about what actually weakens bones over time, since understanding the causes helps make sense of why nutrition matters as much as it does. Inactivity is one of the most significant and modifiable factors. Bone tissue responds directly to mechanical stress, meaning that weight-bearing activity, quite literally the physical load placed on bones during activities like walking, actually signals to your body that bone strength needs to be maintained or increased. Extended periods of inactivity, whether due to a sedentary lifestyle, illness, or reduced mobility, remove this signal and bone density can decline as a result, sometimes more quickly than people realize. Poor diet, particularly one consistently low in calcium, vitamin D, and protein over many years, gradually deprives the body of the raw materials it needs to maintain bone density, which is precisely why the foods we discuss today matter as part of a long-term pattern rather than a short-term fix. Hormonal changes play an enormous role as well, particularly the drop in estrogen that occurs during menopause, since estrogen plays a protective role in slowing bone breakdown, and its decline is a major reason women experience a notably faster rate of bone loss in the years immediately following menopause compared to men of the same age. In fact, women can lose a meaningful percentage of their overall bone density in just the first several years following menopause, which is precisely why bone health conversations with a doctor become especially important during and after this transition. Men are not exempt from hormonal effects either, since declining testosterone levels with age also contribute to gradual bone density loss, just typically at a slower pace and starting somewhat later in life than the changes seen in women. Though the consequences of a fracture in men, once it does occur, are often just as serious, and in some studies associated with even higher rates of complication than in women experiencing a similar injury. Certain medications can also affect bone density with long-term use, including some corticosteroids, certain medications used for acid reflux, and some medications used to treat other chronic conditions. This does not mean these medications should be avoided when genuinely necessary, but it does mean that anyone on long-term medication known to affect bone health should discuss bone density monitoring with their doctor, since catching changes early allows for more effective intervention. So, beyond nutrition, what lifestyle habits genuinely support strong bones as you age? Regular weight-bearing exercise deserves top billing here, and this includes activities like walking, dancing, climbing stairs, and resistance training with weights or resistance bands. These activities place mechanical stress on bones in a way that encourages your body to maintain and in some cases even build additional bone density, particularly when combined with adequate nutrition. It is worth distinguishing weight-bearing exercise from activities like swimming or cycling, which offer wonderful cardiovascular benefits but do not provide the same direct mechanical loading on bones, since your body weight is supported by water or a bicycle seat rather than being carried by your skeleton. This does not mean swimming or cycling should be avoided, simply that they work best as a complement to, rather than a replacement for, activities that genuinely load your bones against gravity. Even modest amounts of regular weight-bearing activity, consistently performed several times a week, have been shown in research to meaningfully support bone health in older adults, making this one of the most accessible and impactful habits available. Maintaining a healthy weight matters too, since being significantly underweight is associated with lower bone density and higher fracture risk, while carrying some healthy body weight actually provides a degree of mechanical loading that can support bone strength, though this should never be used as a reason to disregard the broader health risks associated with excess weight, which is why working toward a healthy, sustainable weight range remains the better overall goal. Getting enough sunlight exposure supports your body's natural vitamin D production, since your skin synthesizes vitamin D when exposed to sunlight, though factors like geographic location, skin tone, sunscreen use, and time spent outdoors all affect how much vitamin D your body actually produces this way. For many people, particularly those in northern climates or who spend most of their time indoors, dietary sources and, when recommended by a doctor, supplementation become an important supplement to whatever sunlight exposure they get naturally. Finally, avoiding smoking and limiting excessive alcohol consumption both play a meaningful role in bone health. Smoking has been consistently linked to reduced bone density and impaired bone healing, while excessive alcohol intake interferes with the body's ability to absorb calcium properly and can disrupt the hormonal balance involved in bone remodeling. Neither habit needs to be eliminated entirely to see some benefit, but meaningfully reducing both is one of the more straightforward ways to protect long-term bone health alongside everything else we have discussed today. It is also worth mentioning bone density screening specifically, since so much of what we have discussed today works best as prevention rather than treatment after the fact. A bone density scan, often called a DEXA scan, is a quick, painless, low radiation test that measures bone mineral density, typically at the hip and spine, and it is the primary tool doctors use to diagnose osteoporosis before a fracture ever occurs. Current guidelines generally recommend this screening for women starting at age 65 and earlier for those with specific risk factors, while men are typically screened somewhat later or when particular risk factors are present. If you have never had a bone density scan and you are over 60, it is worth asking your doctor whether you are due for one, since this simple test can reveal exactly where you stand and allow for a much more targeted conversation about diet, exercise, and, if necessary, medication, rather than relying on guesswork about your own bone health. I want to leave you with this thought before we close. Bone health is one of those areas of well-being that rewards patience and consistency far more than any quick fix ever could. The 7 foods we covered today, dairy, leafy greens, fatty fish, fortified foods, nuts and seeds, eggs and prunes, are not miracle cures, and no single food will single-handedly prevent osteoporosis or reverse bone loss that has already occurred. But woven consistently into your everyday diet, alongside regular weight-bearing movement and a few sensible lifestyle habits, they represent a genuinely evidence-based foundation for keeping your bones as strong as possible for as long as possible, supporting the kind of independence and mobility that lets you keep doing the things you love well into your later years. If this video gave you something valuable today, I would really appreciate it if you took a moment to leave a comment below and let me know which of these 7 foods was already part of your routine or which one surprised you the most. Your comments genuinely help this channel reach more people who could benefit from this information, and they help shape what we cover in future videos. If you have a parent, spouse, or friend over 60 who could use a reminder about protecting their bone health, please consider sharing this video with them today. It might be exactly the nudge they need to add a few of these foods to their weekly grocery list. And if you have not subscribed to Longevity Insight yet, now is a great time to do it. We are building a community here focused on clear, practical, science-based guidance for staying strong and independent at every stage of life, with more videos on heart health, gut health, and healthy sleep already on the channel and plenty more on the way. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload, and I will see you in the next video. Here is to strong bones, steady steps, and many more active years ahead.